May 19th, 2026. Book Fair. Twice a year, the book fair rolled into South Street and turned the library into a miniature marketplace. For 3 days, kids got the rare chance to pick out whatever they wanted. Books, posters, pencils, and all the little things they weren't usually allowed to touch during class. The money went straight into field trips and end-of-the-year activities the PTO liked to organize, which meant everyone treated the fair like a big deal. Teachers managed the crowds, the PTO hovered, and Margaret kept the whole thing running from behind the register. Enter South Street Library, 3rd grade. The 3rd graders hit the hallway like a stampede, voices bouncing off the walls long before the teachers appeared. Margaret was still adjusting the register drawer when Carla's voice cut through the noise. "All right, my friends, eyes up here. We are guests in the library." Her class spilled in behind her anyway, buzzing with that early morning book fair adrenaline. Margaret straightened, smoothed the front of her cardigan, and braced. Carole, Keenan, and Hilary Singer followed with their own little groups. Hilary looked like she'd already confiscated 3 fidget toys. Carole held up a stack of wish list papers like she was guarding state secrets. "Good morning, Margaret," Carla said, breathless but cheerful. "We're here for browsing." "So I gathered," Margaret replied, tapping the register closed. "Welcome." But before she could say anything else, Carla and Carole immediately switched into PTO mode, which was somehow louder and more chaotic than their teacher mode. "Oh, these pens should be up front," Carla said, reaching for the gel pen display Margaret had just finished arranging. Margaret's voice tightened. "Please don't." Carla had already relocated half the display to a different table, scattering pens like confetti. Carole jumped in next, already reorganizing the novelty erasers. "Kids love when these are sorted by color. It's more inviting." "They were sorted by price," Margaret said, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Oh, that doesn't matter," Carole waved off. Behind them, the 3rd graders were already touching everything. One kid unrolled a poster and froze, realizing he couldn't roll it back up. Another poked a glitter pen like it might explode. "Friends," Hilary warned, "look with your eyes, not with your hands." However, no one listened. Margaret moved toward the front counter to finish setting up the register, but Carla followed her like a shadow. "Do you want me to run the register?" Carla asked, already reaching for the buttons. "No," Margaret said, sharper than intended. "I've got it." Carla blinked, taken aback. "Oh, okay." Margaret forced a calmer tone. "Thank you." Behind her, Carole was now moving entire stacks of chapter books to a different table. "They'll sell better over here," she announced. "They were organized by reading level," Margaret said. "Oh, kids don't care about that," Carole replied, as if she hadn't been teaching for 30-plus years. Margaret closed her eyes for half a second. She could feel her patience thinning like old thread. The 3rd graders were now fully in browsing mode, flipping through books, comparing posters, whispers shouting across the room. Carla and Hilary were doing their best to keep them contained, but it was like trying to herd bubbles. Carole approached the counter, switching back into teacher mode. "Margaret, do you need anything before we rotate?" "A moment of silence," Margaret murmured. Carole snorted. "Same." A crash sounded behind them, the erasers hitting the floor. Carla gasped. "Oh no! Who did that?" Margaret didn't even turn around. "You moved them," she said flatly. Carla blinked again. "Well, yes, but..." Margaret stepped out from behind the counter, crouched, and began picking up the erasers one by one. "Please leave the merchandise where I put it." Her tone was polite, but her eyes were not. Carla and Carole exchanged a look and backed off a few inches. The 3rd graders filed out the door toward recess, while Carla and Carole stayed behind, as PTO bystanders ready to overstep before Margaret could even reset the tables. South Street Library, 4th grade. The hallway noise shifted again, the sound of kids who believed they were practically in middle school. Margaret had just finished restacking the pens when the double-class wave hit. Susan walked in first, calm and steady, coffee in hand like a shield. Then came her class, following behind her in a surprisingly neat line. Craig Fay trailed in with his own group, smiling like he had no idea his class was seconds from unraveling. "Morning, Margaret," Susan said, giving her a sharp look. "Good morning," Margaret replied, already bracing. Before she could say anything else, Carla and Carole snapped right back into PTO mode. "Oh! 4th grade loves the posters," Carla said, reaching for the stack Margaret had just re-rolled. "And these chapter books should be over here," Carole added, already lifting a stack. Margaret's patience snapped like a dry twig. "Stop!" Her voice cut through the room. Carla blinked. "We're just—" "No," Margaret said, stepping in between them and the tables. "You're not helping. You're moving everything I've already organized. You're confusing the kids. You're confusing me." Carole frowned. "We're trying to make it look nice." "It already looked nice," Margaret said, jaw tight. "It looked organized. It looked functional. And now it looks like a yard sale." Carla opened her mouth again, but Margaret held up a hand. "Please, just let the students browse. That's all they're here to do today. No purchases, no rearranging, no systems. Just browsing." Carla and Carole backed away from the tables after Margaret's scolding. Their arms were crossed, their lips tight, their energy loud enough to rattle the poster rack. Margaret ignored them, or tried to. She focused on straightening the chapter books they'd already moved twice, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. She could feel the PTO's offended whisper storm behind her, but she refused to give them another inch of attention. Behind them, the fourth graders were already in full browsing mode. One kid unrolled a poster and spun with it like a flag. Susan intercepted him mid-twirl. "Put it down!" she said, taking the tube before it smacked someone. Craig wandered over to the chapter books, hands in pockets. "Wow, this looks great," he said, oblivious to the chaos behind him. Margaret blinked. It was the first kind thing anyone had said to her all morning. "Thank you," she said, voice softening. Craig crouched behind a group of his students who were hovering near the graphic novels. "Hey guys, if you like Dogman, check out this one," he said. Another student tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Fay, what about this one?" Craig smiled. "Ooh, that's a good pick. You've got great taste." Craig moved through the tables with that easy, gentle energy. He wasn't touching the displays, wasn't reorganizing anything, wasn't making Margaret's life harder. He was just helping. Susan noticed it too. She gave Margaret a small, knowing smile across the room. She then stopped a kid from trying to shove a paper tube into his backpack. "Nope," she said, taking it away. "Try again." "Hey, Marge," Craig said, holding up a book. "Do you want this one back on display, or should I hand it to him?" Margaret looked up. The kid beside him was practically vibrating with excitement. "Let him take it. It's on me." Craig grinned. "Awesome. Here you go, buddy." The kid hugged the book like it was a puppy. For the first time that morning, Margaret felt her shoulders drop half an inch. Fourth graders finally cleared out, Susan shepherding them towards specials, while Craig stayed behind long enough to give Margaret an encouraging nod before jogging after his class. South Street Library, 5th grade. The 5th graders arrived with the swagger of kids who believed they were practically in middle school. Tanya led her class in first, her voice low and firm. "Eyes forward, voices off, don't touch anything unless you're planning on buying it tomorrow," she said, giving her students the kind of look that could stop a riot. Behind her, Cara entered with her usual whirlwind energy, juggling wish list papers, redirecting two boys who were already arguing about which poster was actually sick, and answering a girl if they sold slime. They did not. Michelle brought up the calm and unbothered, her class lined up neatly behind her like she trained them for a parade. "Morning, Margaret," Tanya said, exhaling. "Good morning," Margaret replied, adjusting the register. Cara stepped in. "We're just browsing today. No purchases." "Bless you," Margaret murmured. But the PTO heard her anyway. "Oh, 5th grade loves the novelty pencils," Carla said, reaching for the display again. Margaret slapped her hand lightly on the table. "Stop touching things." Carla blinked, offended. "I'm trying to make this fun." "It is fun," Margaret said, "when things stay where they belong." Carole huffed from behind her. "We're volunteers, you know." Margaret didn't even look up at her. "I'm aware." Cara was helping a group of girls compare chapter books, crouching beside them like a coach reviewing plays. "If you liked the last one, you'll love this," she said, handing over a fantasy novel. Tanya was redirecting two boys who were trying to peel stickers off the display. "Hands off, unless you're buying tomorrow," she said, voice low. The 5th graders continued browsing, loud, excited, messy, but manageable. The teachers were doing their jobs. The kids were engaged, and the tables were mostly intact. Carla and Carole were still hovering near the chapter book table. They'd been behaving for all of 5 minutes. Margaret was restraightening the graphic novels when she caught, out of the corner of her eye, Carla reaching for the gel pens again. Margaret's voice cut through the room like a snapped violin string. Carla! Carla froze mid-grab. I wasn't... You were, Margaret said, stepping toward her. And I'm going to say this once, very clearly. Carole straightened, sensing danger. Margaret, we're just trying to... No, Margaret said, holding up a hand. You're not trying to help. You're trying to reorganize, and you're making this harder than it needs to be. Carla blinked, offended. We're volunteers. And I appreciate that, Margaret said, voice tight. But if you keep touching the merchandise, I will ask you to leave the library until the fair officially opens. Margaret didn't flinch. I mean it, she said. If you can't follow my system, you can wait in the hallway until the buying day. This is browsing only. The kids don't need your help. They need space. Carla sputtered. You're kicking us out? I'm giving you a choice, Margaret said. Stop moving things or step out. Carole opened her mouth, closed it, and then opened it again. We're just trying to make it look nice. It was nice, Margaret said, until you touched it. Carla and Carole exchanged a look, but they backed away from the tables, hands raised like they were surrendering to law enforcement. Fine, Carla murmured. We'll supervise. No, Margaret corrected. You'll stand and observe, quietly. Carole huffed but obeyed. The fifth graders finally filed out after 30 minutes of browsing time. Carla and Carole left together shortly after, like they've been wronged. Margaret stood behind the register, hands braced on the counter, shoulders finally dropping. She let out a long breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. No one was touching anything. No one was reorganizing. No one was whisper gossiping in her peripheral vision. Margaret closed her eyes for a beat, savoring it. Of course, that's exactly when the door creaked open. Enter Don Cesar, South Street Library. Hey, Margaret, Don said, stepping inside. Just checking in. How was the first day? Her whole posture changed. Shoulders back, voice softening, expression smoothing out. Oh, Don, she said. Thank God you're here. He blinked, surprised. That bad, huh? Margaret sighed heavily. Carla and Carole have been a lot this morning. Don stepped closer, concerned. What happened? She didn't miss the opportunity. They kept touching everything, she said, gesturing to the tables. Reorganizing, moving merchandise, pressing buttons on the register. I mean, I love that they want to help, but they're making it impossible to keep things straight. Don frowned. They were messing with the register? Oh, yes, Margaret said, nodding. And the displays, and the posters, the bookmarks, the chapter books. Honestly, I'm spending more time undoing their help than running the fair. Don rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't realize they were getting that involved. Margaret leaned in just a little. I hate to bother you with this, but if you could maybe say something, just a gentle reminder that I'm handling the setup, it would really help. He nodded immediately. Yeah, of course. I'll talk to them. She softened even more, voice warm. Thank you, Don. I really appreciate it. He smiled back, a little flustered. No problem. You're doing great in here. Oh, I'm trying, she said, letting out a dramatic little exhale. It's just a lot. Don glanced around the room. The slightly crooked tables, the poster rack leaning at an angle, the gel pens that had clearly been rearranged too many times. Yeah, he said. I can see that. I'll handle it, he said, firmer this time. I knew you would, she said. Don walked out like a man on a mission, ready to face PTO leaders who insisted they'd done nothing wrong. Day 2, Purchase Day. All grades. Enter South Street Library, 3rd grade. By the time their lunch period started, most of the 3rd graders were already lined up outside the library, buzzing with their envelopes and Ziploc bags of money. Hillary brought her class in first, holding the door as they spilled inside with lunch period energy. Kids immediately fanned out across the tables, grabbing novelty pencils, flipping through bookmarks, knocking erasers onto the floor, picking them up, dropping them again. The shelves rattled. The poster rack spun like a lazy carnival. Margaret opened the register. Next. There was no real line, just a clump of kids orbiting the counter, each convinced they were next. Coins hit the counter in uneven piles. Someone tried to pay with big Y coins. Hillary floated between the tables, redirecting kids who were trying to buy things they definitely didn't have enough money for. No, honey, that's not $3. That's 30 cents. Margaret kept the register moving, sliding pencils into bags, handling back change, smoothing out crumpled bills. The tables behind her were already a mess. Bookmarks scattered, erasers mixed into the wrong bins, pencils rolling toward the carpet. And in the middle of all that noise, no one noticed the three boys slipping behind the tall nonfiction shelf. They crouched low, whispering like spies. "Okay, go," one of them said. The first boy shoved 2 erasers into his hoodie pocket. The second boy slid a bookmark up his sleeve. The third boy grabbed a novelty pencil pack and tucked it under his shirt. They moved fast, froze and waited, then kept going. Another eraser, another pencil, another bookmark, a pencil sharpener shaped like a dinosaur, all of it disappearing into pockets, but no one saw. The boys slipped back into the crowd like nothing happened, joining the chaotic line at the counter with empty hands and innocent faces. Margaret rang up another sale, completely unaware, and behind her, the security camera blinked its tiny red light. Hillary finally managed to corral her class toward the door, kids clutching their bags and posters like trophies. A few stragglers tried to sneak one last look at the novelty pencils, but she herded them out with practiced efficiency. "Say thank you to Miss Jones," she called. A scattered chorus of "thank you" followed, half of them already out. The door swung shut behind them, and the room sagged into a brief, messy quiet. Margaret exhaled, rolled her shoulders back, and pulled the cash drawer open. She started counting the bills and pushing the coins into the tray. The tables behind her were a disaster. Pencils knocked sideways, bookmarks mixed into the wrong bins, erasers scattered like confetti. She planned on fixing it later. She had just closed the drawer when she heard voices in the hallway. Carla poked her head in first. "Hi, Margaret! We're here for purchases." Carole followed, her class lined up behind her in a crooked, wiggly line. 10 each. They've got their money. Margaret forced a smile, hoping that the teachers would be on their best behavior today. Great. Send them in. The kids spilled into the library immediately, like they've been waiting all day for this. Kids were flipping through chapter books, knocking over pencil cups, dropping erasers. "Miss Jones, I have $5. Can I get 2 things? Do you have change for a 20? My mom said I could get whatever I wanted, but I forgot the note." Carla and Carole floated around their groups, trying to keep the kids from buying things they didn't have money for. But they weren't exactly enforcing order. They were more like decorative supervision, present, but not preventing anything. Carole redirected a kid who was trying to buy a $14 hardcover with $2. "Sweetie, no. Try the paperbacks." Carla was doing the same thing with her group, though her vision of supervision was more like commentary. "Oh, that's cute. Oh, that's a good choice. Oh, don't get that. It breaks easily." The 7th kid had exact change and proudly announced it like he's solved a math problem. "Great job," Margaret said, handing him his bag. The 10th kid was whispering with a friend about whether he should get the shark pencil or the soccer pencil. By the time the last 4th grader paid, the room looked like it had survived a small storm, but the counter was clear and the drawer was balanced enough for now. Carla clapped her hands. "All right, everyone, back to lunch." Carole echoed her. "Let's go, let's go." The kids filed out, chattering, comparing what they bought, waving pencils in the air like trophies. The door swung shut behind them.